Merhaba.
Ben, Hal ben Halil Köklü. Beni daha önce zaten görmüştünüz. Bugün iki yenilik var aslında. Birincisi Durul aramıza katıldı. Yani ben Headless Türkiye'yi kendim organize ediyordum. Eee, Ama yalnız pek iyi gitmiyor. Ve aynı zamanda da AWS Community'de de Durul'un bu konuyla alakalı ilgili olduğunu görmüştüm. Daha doğrusu Sufle'de de zaten bahsetmiştiler ilgili olduğunu. Kendisine teklif ettim. O da kabul etti. Durun hoş geldin.
Hoş bulduk. Hoş bulduk Halil. Ee,
Ee,
Çok mutluyum bu teklifi kabul ettiğim için. Çok da heyecanlıyım açıkçası.
Süper. Bir de ikinci yenilikte yani bir İngilizce konu davet etmemiz. Yani headless alanında daha önce bayağı bir işler yapmış bir tanınmış birini davet etmesi istedik ki sizin için de erişilebilir olsun. Yani belki biraz daha basit İngilizce ile veya sizin belki İngilizce soru sormakta belki zorlanabilirsiniz. Türkçe soru sorabilirsiniz. Biz onu İngilizceye çevirip Philip'e soracağız. Philip şu anda bekliyor. Az sonra aramıza alacağız. İstediğiniz an soru sorabilirsiniz chat'e. Biz onu entegre etmeye çalışacağız sohbetimize. Başlayabiliriz bence.
Başlayalım.
Oh,
Hi, Philip.
hey, hey, hey, hello.
We're live, as you can see.
Mm-hmm.
You've met me before. I'm sure you're going to mention that. And Durul is from an AWS partner in Turkey. He's a lead software engineer there and a partner.
Mm-hmm.
He's really into headless as well.
Nice to meet you.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Philip.
nice.
So you're on the Turkish community for headless. It's quite a new community, and as you can imagine, it's quite niche as well. But I think it'll get a bigger audience soon. You've attended other communities before. I think the last one was the Vue Storefront conference in India.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. Like these days, everything is online, so you don't feel it that much, but it's still great to be able to connect. I think it's even better at at some ways because I probably wouldn't be able to travel there.
Yeah, I mean, in contrary to the Indian community, we don't speak English normally in Turkey. So I think that might be a difference. Have you attended any non-English speaking conference where you spoke English as an outlier?
Well, honestly, I've been on some Polish conferences where I was speaking English.
Okay, it was easier than speaking Polish, right?
Yeah, definitely. Honestly, like whenever I have to talk in Polish in front of people, I'm extremely scared because I'm just not used to this.
Yeah, same for me. I can't present anything in Turkish because I don't have the vocabulary for it.
Exactly, exactly. That just doesn't feel normal. Like the phrases that you're usually making when describing something, etc., they suddenly disappeared.
Yeah. You almost like speak English. It's like half English and half native.
Hmm.
So where are you at the moment, and how did you break your MacBook Pro?
Yeah. So right now I'm in Sweden at my girlfriend's parents' house, and like the setup is suboptimal for sure because I'm using 4 years old Surface Pro, and I'm in my girlfriend's young sister room. But yeah, like I don't have luck with MacBooks, honestly. Like my first MacBook, it broke after a year. I mean, the camera got broke, the keyboard got broke. From four USB-C ports, only one is working, and right now it's like just unusable. So I took the new one and the old one here, and I decided, okay, like let's set up the new one, and I'm keeping the old one just because I have everything set it up there. And what happened is that I opened the laptop, I turned it on, and on my eyes, the screen just broke. But fortunately, it looks like it's a common thing. It's a manufactural issue, so they just took it and repaired it, and I'm getting it tomorrow.
I think I've seen reports about that as well, that it's common.
Yeah, they can't make a good laptop for like 5 years already, which is a little bit silly, especially that I jumped the hype train exactly at the moment when they stopped doing the good MacBooks.
I have high hopes with the new ones,
I
but
also
since it's the first version, it's gonna have its teething issues. Okay, so tell us about Vue Storefront. How did it come to be, and at which company have you done this?
I don't know, like, have you made any explanation, like, what Vue Storefront is? Maybe I should start with this.
That's fine, I think. Please do.
Okay, so if you don't know what Vue Storefront is, the name is pretty suggestive, I would say, and descriptive, because essentially what it is, it's a storefront on Vue.js, but this is how it started, and right now it's a full ecosystem of products, and it's becoming even more. So when we were starting, like, what we're thinking about is how to solve our own problems, and I think this is probably the best way to start any product and to start any business, because actually you're the user, you know that the problem is real, so you're not looking for a product market fit, you just have it because you're solving your own problems and you're the representative of this niche. And we were in an agency called Divante. This is an e-commerce software house, and at that time we were dealing with a number of issues. Like, one of them was a shortage of developers, of Magento developers, because if you want to be a front-end developer and if you want to do Magento, you have to be aware that you will be like 5, maybe 10 years behind the market. So at the time when everyone are using shiny frameworks like Vue.js and React, you are actually discovering jQuery. At the time when everyone are moving from Angular 1, you're just discovering Require.js, etc. And it was very hard to actually find a front-end developers for Magento at that time. At the same time, we already saw the problems with like a growing complexity of the code bases that we're maintaining. So a lot of projects that we had were actually huge shops, really huge shops. And having front-end developers working along with back-end developers on the same files, on the same code base, it was contributing to a lot of technological debt on both sides, because always front-end developers had to do a little bit of back-end work, back-end developers had to do a little bit of front-end work, and as you could imagine, like, none of them was happy about the work of the other group. So there was a number of reasons why we decided, okay, so let's try detaching this. Let's try having a separate front-end that is communicating with Magento just through an API, so we can actually hire front-end developers, not Magento developers, that will work with this new stack. And at the same time, we can make the job a little bit more exciting, because you're no longer working with technologies from 10 years ago, but you're working with something new. And we started this with React, and that was a funny story, because Vue Storefront, like the first version of Vue Storefront, was on React. It was done by a backend developer, and I think after 3 months we had like a product page. So we saw that it's very hard to adapt by backend developers. Also, we kind of felt that it's not very friendly for newcomers. So we decided, okay, so let's give something else a try. And then we were discussing like what. So there was Angular 2, but Angular 2 at that time was at the very early stages. There was also Angular 1, which I already worked with, and I didn't like it. And there was a new shiny framework called Vue.js. At that time, it was a huge bet, because we were discussing if that would be a Vue.js or Aurelia.js. You probably don't know what Aurelia.js is, so this is giving you a very good perspective of how bad would the situation be if you would choose Aurelia.js.
Yeah.
But fortunately, we gave Vue.js a shot, and we tried it. We were able to create 2 pages, in a week, And then we also saw that when we were putting a junior developers in the project, they were becoming very fluent and very productive within days, really. So it is a completely different story than React. And we thought, okay, so this is actually the project, this is actually the framework that we're gonna use. And we obviously had no idea about modern frontend. We had no idea about headless. So we've put that on GitHub, hoping that other agencies will join, that some individual contributors will join, and we will build something that will be beneficial for the whole e-commerce community. And what is fascinating is this is exactly what happened. And like usually you expect those things, but they don't happen. And in case of Vue Storefront, like within few months, we already had like 20 agencies interested in contributing, a lot of GitHub stars. We started being invited into multiple conferences, discussion panels, and honestly, like after a year, we felt like celebrities, like we're everywhere. So in the Magento community, you could see that there is a hype for a team called Hiva. I have no idea how to pronounce it. It's HYVA, and we, like everyone, keep talking about this. They're being invited everywhere, and we were at the exactly same stage back then. And after 3 years, Vue Storefront had more than 500 live stores all around the world because we are actively promoting this. Actually, that was a fascinating part of this, because our way of building community was mostly through hackathons. So we're organizing hackathons in different parts of the world. And on each of those hackathons, there was like, 20, 30 people. And it was more like a contribution day. So people were actually looking at the issues, contributing to Vue Storefront, learning it. And this is how we have built a global community of like more than 4,000 developers at that time, which is crazy to me. And after those 3 years, with those 500 live stores and a huge community, we decided that it's time to create a separate business. Because if you are a product that is created within an agency, you have a very good start, because you can use the resources of the agency, you can use the network of the agency. But at the same time, when you want to step into a serious game and formulate proper partnerships, etc., you're not looking at you as a product company or a vendor. They are looking at you as an agency. So if you're running an agency, you won't pay or you won't support other agency, right? So our main goal was actually to detach completely from Devante, to don't have them in the cap table, to be fully independent and honest with our future partners. This is what happened after those 3 years. And there were 6 of us, if I remember correctly, in November of 2020. And right now, after less than 2 years, there's more than 100 of us in Vue Storefront. And we keep building. And we are no longer building just a front end. We are having a UI library. We're having hosting. We're having the whole cloud infrastructure, actually, which is evolving into a true B2B SaaS. And we have a lot of new products in the pipeline right now, which I won't disclose, but certainly this is exciting.
Yeah, it definitely is. The bet on Vue.js was, I guess, it was a big one. So I was actually going to ask you why is it like Vue.js? Because there's a lot of feedback on React being the highest entry curve. From the community. So I think also Vue.js has a kind of a easier adoption. It's almost like it is kind of similar to the Angular 1 syntax and usage. So it is a bit more definitely developer friendly.
Yeah, I mean, it is definitely much easier, but also the thing that was exciting to me at that time and why I was pushing this storefront, that was fully community driven. So like React had a big company behind, Facebook had a big company behind. So it also felt, natural to choose Vue because we wanted to be a community driven product. We were starting with Magento, which is also a community driven space. So why not to choose a community driven framework as well? And honestly, that this after some time became a huge growth engine for us because whole Vue.js community was also cheering for us. They were inviting us at events and we became kind of like an official Vue.js storefront. Like a lot of people think that we are, that Vue.js has its official storefront and we are it. And right now on Series A, even you, creator of Vue.js, became our angel investor, so we kind of becoming one.
Wow, great. Yeah, I mean, in the history of the open source frameworks, supporting each other, we saw like Laravel community supporting Vue.js and kind of booming Vue.js, adopting Vue as a default like UI framework for Laravel's, Laravel framework, and it's like going almost the same direction with Vue and Vue Storefront. So it's awesome to hear.
Yeah, I mean, like the good thing about adopting early technologies is that it's very easy to be recognizable there. It's very easy to actually, win it all. And if the framework or technology or a community is growing, you're growing together with them and you're fully benefiting from it. So, in our case, it was a huge, huge growth engine. It was a good bet. Of course, we had no idea about all the benefits. So it was pure bet and a lot of luck, but it paid off.
So Philip, what I'm wondering is, how did you integrate these legacy old e-commerce systems? Because they're not fast, they're not headless, like Magento, for example.
So I will tell you
what one.
Yeah, I will tell you what we did with Magento and what we are thinking about doing right now with this sort of technologies. So the problem with Magento was that it was just slow when the catalog was big and you had to query it. And what we did is we actually created a separate database that was synchronized with Magento, and those database was on Elasticsearch. And we had a middleware in Node.js that was called Vue Storefront API. So the storefront was calling Vue Storefront API, and Vue Storefront API was not querying the Magento. It was querying the database that was synced with Magento, so the Elasticsearch database. And we're getting all the product data, orders, everything that could be saved as a data from there. But there was also a lot of dynamic calls, like user sessions, this sort of stuff. So for this, we are still querying Magento, but the goal was to overcome the slowness of the product catalog querying, and Elasticsearch was perfect for that.
Yeah, definitely.
And I forgot the second part of the answer. And like right now we have a little bit different approach. So first of all, like there's not so many platforms out there that still have a very slow API, which is great. Even Magento has Elasticsearch that you can just plug into. And we just don't integrate with those. But if there is any customer that is actually willing to do this, and this is a bottleneck for them, what we suggest is basically caching the responses on the middleware level for product catalog. And we are also exploring the GraphQL space here, where caching could be a little bit tougher, but still, I think this is a go-to way. Because the complexity, the cost of having this synchronization between Magento and Vue Storefront database was huge. And the whole reason why we actually created Vue Storefront 2 was also to get rid of this complexity, to make Vue Storefront more appealing also for smaller customers.
So in Vue Storefront 2, you have kind of rebuilt it with Nuxt.js, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what was the decision behind that?
Well, like in the Vue.js world, you don't have many options. Like you can just use Nuxt or use Vue.js on its own. There was at that, I think, like when we were starting, there was also Gridstone, which is kind of like an equivalent of Gatsby. But we also see that, right now Gatsby is being eaten by Next.js, and exactly the same thing is happening with Nuxt. The only difference is that Nuxt 2 is not so mature when it comes to SSG, but Nuxt 3 is around the corner, and they are supposed to be very mature regarding this. So I also expect exactly the same thing to happen in the Vue.js space. And the truth is, like when we were starting Vue Storefront, we already met with Chopin Brothers, the creators of Next.js, and we talked with them, and they offered that, like, guys, why you won't use Next.js? But it sounded a little bit too risky to us at that time because Next.js was very young. And what happened is that, when we were creating our own Vue Storefront, like over years, we saw that we actually started copying the solutions from Nuxt and building exactly the same features because clients started requesting them. And we even started looking at the APIs of Nuxt, how they did that to do exactly the same because, this is a good solution, proven, etc. So when we decided that it's time to do a rewrite, of course we decided to use Nuxt because our goal was to maintain as least code as possible.
Yeah.
Of course, like being so tied to a specific vendor is always a risk, but we also have a very good relation with Nuxt guys. They are also angel investors in, or they are not. Actually, they are not, but they are great supporters of Vue Storefront. So
I think if I'm right, you have a really good connection and relationship with the Vue core team, with the Nuxt core team, and other dependencies you're using in Vue Storefront.
Yeah, and I think that's the key. Like, if you are using any kind of software, you have to build a relationship with them because otherwise you're left on your own when something goes wrong, right? And in our case, it will be catastrophe. Like, imagine that Nuxt is doing something that will close source. It's like Nuxt is becoming closed source, or there are some limitations put in on that. Our business is down. So we have to have a good relation. We have to know what is ahead. We have to also have this mutual benefits, which we're trying to work out as well. And so far it's going great. I mean, Nuxt got some investment, I think 2 years ago. They're working on commercial products right now. And there is a place for Vue Storefront in there.
Are you able to influence the roadmap for Nuxt or Vue based
Slightly.
on challenges you see?
Slightly, yes. I mean, we have regular catch-ups. They're also asking us for feedback. So we're trying to, share as much as possible, especially that sometimes we are early adapters of many things. And we're also hacking on Nuxt a lot. So we also have a pretty unique perspective. So I can say that we have some influence, but of course there are many stakeholders. So we can say that we want this, we want that, and it's going to be delivered because the whole community is waiting for it, right?
Yeah. I think you also used some early features of Nuxt 3, like the backport of composition API.
Yeah, and that was a huge mistake, honestly. So, like, when we started building Vue Storefront 2, I think it was like at the beginning of last year or even earlier.
Wasn't it December 2019 when we started? When you start with Lovecraft?
Yeah, so at that time, we only knew that there will be Vue 3. We knew that there will be composition API, and someone made a module for Vue.js, not even for Nuxt, that was adding the composition API syntax. So what we did is to port it into Nuxt. We actually had to write a huge amount of code to make it work with server-side rendering, to make it secure, to make sure that the context is not leaking, etc., etc. And we did a lot of work that actually Nuxt did over time. Like, it took them a year to develop all of this, what we developed. But the problem is that a lot of things that we have right now in the code base is to solve problems that are already solved. So right now we are doing a huge rewrite again, mostly internally, not externally, but like we're able to get rid of like 70% of the code base. Just just made to support composition API in our project. And honestly, we spent a lot of time on figuring this out. That could be spent elsewhere and better. So I would definitely not jump into this early adapter bandwagon. I think we were the first, for this scale of the project, we're the first adapters of composition API in Nuxt in the world. And that was terribly stupid. Right now, the Nuxt 3 is around the corner, and everyone are asking us, like, when will you migrate? And I'm always saying, just wait a little bit. Just wait until it's 1.0. Then wait a little bit longer to see how stable it is, and then we can decide if we want to migrate or not. Because, like the new shiny things, like we all want to get them. We all want better developer experience. We all want hype. But in the end, like, stability is the most important thing, because if you are a huge merchant and your website will go down for, I don't know, 10 minutes, you could waste millions of dollars, right? And was it worth a better developer experience? I don't think so. Like, I think it's a problem of the whole front-end space, that they're very much hyped and they're using hack technologies, while you still can make a website, using Gulp and AngularJS. And honestly, the difference won't be that much noticeable. Maybe some features regarding lazy loading and this sort of stuff are a little bit better handled in modern frameworks. But apart from this, it's most of the improvements lies on the developer experience and ease of things, and tooling, of course, like external.
So the internal rewrite you're doing, that's not the Nuxt 3 upgrade yet.
No, we want to be much readier for Nuxt 3 with that. So we are taking into account the APIs, etc. But we are not even using Nuxt Bridge, which is, for those who don't know, Nuxt Bridge is basically a tool that you can install into your Nuxt application to bring in the feature of Nuxt 3. But when I asked the Chopin brothers, should we use Nuxt Bridge, they said better use Nuxt 3. And if I don't want to use the Nuxt 3 and the Nuxt Bridge is even less stable, then I probably stay with what we have right now, wait a little bit and then adapt. But of course, we are always looking at what is coming in Nuxt 3. We are always watching the issues, the RFCs. So whatever we are planning right now, for example, for multi-tenancy and this sort of stuff, we're always trying to see, okay, so how Nuxt 3 is handling this, and always have, in our internal RFC, how the migration would look like to Nuxt 3. And we want to have it as, painless as possible. It's not an easy thing. It makes things a little bit longer, but at the same time, we feel much safer with that, because we even saw a lot of, bugs in the current composition API plugin. And I think this is all right, because it was never meant to be used in production, even though everyone are using it in production.
Speaking of early adopters, how did you get clients to use Vue Storefront 2?
Well, there was one. There was one who was so generous that decided to sponsor the first integration for Vue Storefront 2, which was essentially a Vue Storefront 2, because the first integration is basically the framework itself. And this company was Lovecraft, and the person driving it was you. So thanks so much. So this is actually how it started, right? Like this is how we got the first clients for Commerce Tools integration. And once we had, a POC, then a regular sales process, like we started pitching it to people. And because the headless market is very young, and honestly, everyone are pitching their products as, perfect, no bugs, production ready, etc. The reality is none of them is like this. Really, I'm talking with people, I'm seeing, and whenever I feel oh God, what we have right now is not perfect. It works, it's stable, but there's so many things that we could correct. And then there's someone coming from the competitor, I won't mention which one, saying that, half of the things that was pitched is not working, and they're coming back to us. It's a little bit relieving. Of course, you should pray for perfection, but people are also very forgiving, because a lot of them is aware that you are still maybe early majority right now, or late majority even, in the headless commerce space, and the products that are on the market, they are not perfect, and many of them is still looking for product market fit, and probably will pivot here and there.
Yeah, I think we spoke on the phone about Vue Storefront 1. And I think, if I recall correctly, I had asked, hey, I understand why Vue Storefront 1 has this middleware with Elasticsearch, etc., because there are no good APIs. In our case, Commerce Tools has good APIs, so is there a way we can go direct without this middleware? Mm-hmm. And then you essentially said, well, we already have a concept. Let me show you. And you already had the documentation. So that was very impressive. And I think we had two options. As you said, there was nothing else in headless. I think there was one or two, but we didn't believe they were ready. So we either had to build it ourselves, and we've never built something with Vue Nuxt or React Next. So we wanted to work with a team who's done this before and who know how to build an open source product, how to build a product which is maintainable, etc. And then when we also met in Wrocław in Poland, that was even more reassured. And then we had also our Berlin trip, right, when we did the commercials training. So we felt like that was really, really great partnership.
I remember it very good because I was driving there actually from a 2-day party. That was the birthday of my friend.
To Berlin or to Wrocław?
To Berlin.
Okay, cool.
Directly from there, and I had to switch the transportation like 3 or 4 times. Like there was a bus, and there was a train, then there was a bus again. Crazy stuff, but great time. I mean, it was great to learn commerce tools at that time because what we were used to were monoliths that were trying to be headless, and commerce tools was actually the first platform that was headless from the very beginning. And it was fascinating to learn their approach, and it was of course completely different than Magento trainings and this sort of stuff, because you're actually learning just how to consume API and how to set up things in the merchant center, maybe how to extend some things. But this is cloud native. This is completely different from okay, so now I'm digging into the source code, I'm creating this module, this is how it works. You have no idea how it works internally, and you don't have to, because it's cloud native. And honestly, like when this completely changed my perspective on how we should actually treat it and how we should build the front end. Like I started thinking about the backend platform just as a provider of API, and only about the API, nothing else from my perspective. And I think this is also a good mental model when you're building a front end. Like when you're hiring people, you don't really have to hire people who are knowledgeable about some specific platform. They have to be knowledgeable about building front ends, because all they do, like if they are building a single page applications, they're always just consuming some APIs, and usually they have no idea what APIs are doing, right?
And we have one question from Ur. He's asking what the most challenging part was while you developed Vue Storefront with Nuxt, and how did you handle coding standards, etc., for such a huge project?
Okay, so I think I already mentioned the toughest part. So the toughest part was actually trying to adapt the newest technologies within Nuxt, and it seemed much easier at the beginning. What else was challenging? Like at first we wanted to build agnostic APIs. So we thought, okay, Vue Storefront 1 was agnostic, but in reality, like there was like 2 integrations for Vue Storefront 1. And Vue Storefront 2, we also wanted to keep agnostic, but at the same time, we started selling it to bigger clients. And we spent a lot of time on trying to like unify those APIs, those data models, etc. And the outcome of this was that it's just not doable. Like it's not doable if you have an enterprise customer or even mid-sized customer, because they want to use those APIs to full extent. And in the headless world, especially in the headless world, like the selling point of a platform is usually their API. And if you're trying to unify them and agnosticize them, you're effectively killing this selling point of this platform. So it was, at the same time, it was a very tough process to make, but also a very good learning that this is just not worth pushing forward. And now the coding standards, how we are keeping them. Well, like honestly, like there are 2 types of integrations that we have, and one of those are our own integrations and the code that we develop, and this is pretty easy to keep the coding standards because you just have architect, the architect saying, okay, these are the rules, this is the ESLint config that you have to use, these are the coding conventions that you have to use. But there is also an external factor, which is a community, and we tried to be a little bit restrictive with community. It didn't work. So right now, for the community. We're just trying to follow the same naming conventions which are described, and we're trying to have the same ESLint config, and that's it, really. Like I believe that when you are making something open source and you really want people to contribute, and that's one of the goals. Not it's just not allowed, but this is one of the goals. To make it contribution friendly, you should have as few rules as possible. And the major driver behind success of Vue Storefront 1 was that there was no rules, because we didn't know that they are needed for the open source project.
I have a question about building an open source product. So I haven't really seen an open collective link or a GitHub sponsorship on the Vue Storefront GitHub repository. So how do you monetize the product? I know it is mostly regarding the enterprise contracts, probably, but I wanted to hear about it from you more.
Okay, so this is the toughest thing when you're running an open source project and then you want to monetize on it, and the question is how, right? And the truth is that open source is a great asset and is allowing you to monetize and win the market in ways that weren't possible before. But at the same time, it is closing a lot of ways of obvious monetization, because those ways could put you on a collision course with your community. I will give a little bit of examples, but let me start with how we started. So when we were starting Vue Storefront 1, it was simple because we were part of an agency. So how we were making money was basically through implementation. So the agency was allocating some budget to develop the storefront. Then we were having the first projects, and percentage of those projects was going into the percentage of the revenue from those projects was going into Vue Storefront. So we were able to hire more people, etc., etc. The problem with that model started when we stopped being part of an agency, and we didn't want, because of course we could continue that, and I could guarantee you that we would make a lot of money. But we wanted to be a product company, we wanted to focus on the product. And there was a lot of discussions on how to monetize that, because there's a lot of established models. Usually when you have an open source project, how you monetize on this, you're setting up a hosting service, right? Sometimes you're also having an enterprise version when you have support, SLA, maybe some special features, and that's it. And it sounds obvious, but the reality is that for every project, it has to be figured out from scratch, really, and it doesn't just fit every project. So in our case, of course, we had cloud, and we are still having cloud, and we really believe that this is the future, because the cloud is actually answering to the needs of our community. So we have the project, you're setting it up, and then the first thought that you have, okay, so where I will host it. So this is what we are providing. The next thing is that we're this is a very interesting thing. So how we started making money was also on selling integration. So not everything was open source. For example, we had open source integration for, let's say, at that time, commerce tools, but the Algolia integration, the CMS integration, everything, that was a paid extension, an enterprise offering. And at first we thought, oh, this is great, this is how we're gonna make money, right? But very quickly we also realized, okay, but what if someone from the community would develop exactly the same Algolia integration? Would we encourage them to continue? Would we promote this? Or will we silently, act like nothing happened?
Yeah.
This is putting you on a collision course, because you want to encourage your community to build new things. You want to encourage them to enrich the ecosystem, to experiment. This is what open source is about, right? So right now our model works like this. We are having some open source integrations, and open source integrations with platforms that had either a free tier or low paid tier. And we also have enterprise integrations. And enterprise integrations are with platforms that are, well, for enterprise, like SAP Commerce Cloud, Salesforce Commerce Cloud, Commerce Tools. We kept Commerce Tools open source for quite some time. We saw almost zero interest, except people who were actually our clients. And also from them, there was I think there was in total maybe 20 or 15 pull requests in a year. This is not much. And some of them were correcting typos in the documentation. So we also saw that the economics for this is much lower, And at the same time, if you can afford, like 200K a year to pay a license for some enterprise software, you could probably also afford the license for the front end and everything that comes with it, right? So that was our way of thinking. And from those projects, we're actually sponsoring the work of people who are doing the open source ones. But this has also, this is also not something perfect for us. Because honestly, I would love to open source everything and just, embrace the community spirit, not only in the open source integrations, but also in the enterprise ones. So the future model for us is that we are actually building our SaaS, and the majority of value is moving from the boilerplate there. And this SaaS and the front end, they are connected through the API layer, right? Like right now we have the middleware, and you're essentially calling middleware. So imagine something much more powerful as a SaaS platform that you're connecting to. Then we can open source all the front ends, because essentially you're always our customer. Of course, there will be a free plan, because I don't believe that you can do open source without a free plan. But like there is a lot of thinking, like how to make a proper business model to not be on a collision course with the community, because you have to make it. I think Storyblock is a great example here. You have to make it in a way that is commercial, and people are becoming your clients, but at the same time you're not losing this open source spirit. So it is open for modifications. You can make extensions. You can actually, the extensibility is so well thought that you can be really creative. And I think that's a very important thing when you're building a SaaS, and the SaaS is extendable, and you're having an open source community. Those extensions should allow some level of creativity. And this is exactly what we are aiming for. So we are aiming for open sourcing as much as possible, and just having the commercial bit on the cloud side. And it could sound obvious right now, but believe me, we came a very long way to realize that, because there's a lot of nuances and a lot of stakeholders. When you're discussing with a go-to-market team, there are always like different arguments, and in the end, we all have to agree like how important open source is, what we're getting from it, and that we want to continue that. And there's always a lot of internal discussions and alignment, but I think we are at the right place for quite some time already. And our business model is also evolving with the needs of the market. For example, when you were starting a headless commerce project like 2 years ago, like what you needed was exactly a boilerplate. But right now, the maturity of the market is growing. Right now, all vendors, they're developing some kind of their own boilerplates as well. And what you need right now is something that will help you to professionalize your head. Let's call it a head. It's something that will take out a lot of work from you, so you can just focus on building what is specific to your business, because there is a lot of maintenance, there is a lot of changes in the headless commerce market, and it's extremely hard to catch up if you are doing everything on your own. So you need a vendor that will actually take it out from you, and that you can be sure that, okay, if there's anything new on the headless commerce market, I can adapt it very easily. If there is any new vendor, I don't have to integrate with them manually. I can, swap my vendors, because there's a lot of new players coming in the game. Like there's a lot of things related actually to the maintenance of the front-end application, but not only front-end application, because I like to call it a head for headless. And the head for headless is actually not only the front-end, but also the data part, which is an orchestration layer. Yeah.
Speaking of Vue Storefront Cloud, could you maybe tell to also listeners what it is, and how can we use it? Like, how is it integrated to our development experience and deployment, etc.?
Okay, so I can tell you what it is right now, and I can also tell you what would it be in the future without disclosing so many details. So right now, Vue Storefront Cloud is essentially a cloud infrastructure for Vue Storefront. So you can host everything in there. You have a built-in CDN, built-in caching, you have monitoring, you have basic analytics for that. So when you're an agency or any kind of merchant, if you don't want to deal with the infrastructure, and believe me, you don't want to deal with the infrastructure, you want to focus on other things, you're just handing it over to us. We're taking care of everything. We're making sure it's fast. We're making sure it's performant. We're making sure it's stable. And you're just building the front end. And there's a lot of nuances when having to host this sort of stuff, especially when you're stepping into multi-tenancy game and this sort of stuff. So we are taking it from you. We're hosting it. We are taking care of the CI/CD pipelines, like everything related to infrastructure is on us. You really don't need any kind of know-how in there. And what we would like it to be in the future is something much richer. We would like this to be a center of Vue Storefront ecosystem with a marketplace, with some additional products giving additional value around, fields like analytics, data orchestration, this sort of stuff. And this is already happening. I mean, we already have those projects being built, and sooner or later they're gonna be launched when we think we're happy with them. And honestly, I'm super excited about this because this is gonna be like a huge step in the Vue Storefront history. But I don't want to disclose that much. So right now, let's say that the cloud will be much more exciting.
Sounds good. I was wondering if you would say that you compete with Vercel and Next.js Commerce.
That's a good question because at some point, yes, of course. But going this direction, we are probably competing with every hosting provider in the world. And if hosting would be the only commercial product that we have, probably that would be a hard competitor. But the reality is that we are having more than one product, and we'll have even more of them. And Next.js Storefront is just an accelerator. Vue Storefront is much more. Vue Storefront is a framework for building e-commerce storefronts that is not only having the boilerplate, but also a UI library, also other libraries, for example, for caching, some integrations, etc. So I wouldn't call Next.js Commerce a direct competitor. Maybe if you're building a very small shop, those things could be comparable. And the Vercel, like at a very high level, it is our competitor, but also like we are focusing on e-commerce, and everything that we will build in the future will be focused on e-commerce, on increasing the satisfaction of e-commerce clients, while Vercel is a general purpose framework, not framework, but product. And just from this perspective, they will never reach this level of excellence regarding e-commerce as we will, and at the same time, we will never be as general as Vercel. So I would say they are probably competitors for like a very small part of the market.
Yeah,
in numbers, it's a huge part of the market, but these are usually a very small customers that are also, in many cases, not willing to pay.
And from the origin point of view, like the Vue Storefront's origin and the pain point, and maybe let's say Next.js's pain point, and those are like really two different perspectives, as you said. So I'm with you on this one.
Okay, good to know that I'm not telling bullshit. At the same time, when you're looking at the APIs actually of Vue Storefront and Next.js Commerce, they're very simple and very similar. So they're both based on, I think, Next.js Commerce is based on hooks with a very, very similar names as ours. And I'm not sure, maybe there was some kind of inspiration, maybe it wasn't, because this is also a common way of doing stuff. But it's also interesting to see that all of those front-end solutions, they are more or less coming into the same direction. And I don't see this only on Next.js and Vue Storefront. I see this also in other projects.
Okay, I think the other part we wanted to ask you was your experience getting into Y Combinator, and then your investment, and in particular we're interested because Early Bird Digital East is a Turkey-based fund. How was that experience?
Okay, so let me start with Y Combinator, and I think I will disappoint you a little bit because we joined Y Combinator remotely in the middle of COVID. So we're not meeting with Paul Graham. We're not coming to San Francisco. It was all in our own houses via Zoom meeting. But apart from this, apart from probably one of the most important parts, which is networking, and they really tried to still help us to network. They established some discussion panels, some groups where we're meeting, etc. Apart from the networking part, I think it's extremely useful for an really early stage startup. We joined Y Combinator after signing our seed round and after already having some customers and being a little bit more mature. So we still learned a lot from them, especially how to fundraise, what are the metrics of a healthy company, what to look at. Like there was tons of knowledge, but a lot of this knowledge would be much more useful like 3 years ago or so. So if you're an early stage company, it's definitely worth joining YC. If you are at later stages, you should, I would say you should consider not doing that and focusing on something else. But of course, like it's all different. Like all the companies are different, all companies have different problems. But the YC is definitely focusing on doing the first steps right. And we met amazing people, and that was also great. Like we have access to their internal knowledge base, and this is extremely useful. And if you're a later stage company and you're considering joining YC, probably this knowledge base is one single reason why it might be worth doing that. We also got introduced to some amazing people who are still supporting us and asking, when we were asking about the advice from very experienced founders, we're getting it. We're having some webinars with people like, Airbnb founders telling their story. So there is a lot of value in YC, definitely. We didn't felt, this YC vibe because it was online, but I think it's definitely not something that is black or white. You can, but if you're an early stage company, definitely it's worth trying out.
And your Series A?
Yeah, early bird. Yeah,
Random, early bird.
What I can say is that like what we're trying to look for is finding investors that are founder friendly, because the last thing you want is having a VC that will try to take you out of the business when things go wrong, that don't believe you. And I think we made a very good decision. Like early bird, they're super helpful, especially with the recruitment. Random is also extremely helpful. Power Ventures as well. I mean, all our investors so far are proving themselves as really founder friendly, especially now, when the market is maybe not yet collapsing, but it's not in such a good condition as it was like 6 months ago. This is actually when when the investors have a chance to prove themselves if they're really founder friendly or not. And we haven't seen any weird signals from them. They're super helpful, just like they were before. So I think that was also a very good bet. And this is something that I would advise. Like you can even go with the investor that might not be a tier 1 investor, but is founder friendly. Just go with them, because essentially none of the investors will run business for you. None of the investors will take you to another level. Really, I don't believe in that. What you're looking for is someone you can ask for advice, or you can ask for a favor, that won't try to intervene in your business, and we're lucky to have them.
Yeah, I think the right VC or investor decision is really important, because it can shape the way the company is going, the direction the company is going.
Definitely. For example, I've seen some Twitter threads about the top VCs that are trying, to take control of their companies, that are suing the founders. Like, this is horrendous situation, and it's unimaginable with our current investors, which is great, because the last thing you want, the last thing you want is running a startup which is stressful enough, and then stressing that if something will go wrong, you will not only bankrupt, or you won't even have a chance to bankrupt or improve, because then someone will be watching your back and trying to take out the control of your company. I can't imagine, how stressful would this be.
Okay, so I think the other thing I wanted to ask was that, Turkey is an interesting space where there's the development happens domestically. So there's providers who are for the domestic market. There are developers who work for Turkish companies, and they have also interesting payment method setups and so on. So how would you? So do you think it would be easy for them to integrate Vue Storefront? And how would integrating a new backend system, a new e-commerce system, a new payment system work? With Vue
Okay,
Storefront?
so basically, like, when you're integrating with Vue Storefront, I would say it's rather easy. So we have our own boilerplate for the integration, which is containing like abstracted business logic plus the UI. And what you have to do is basically to first write an API client, which is a weird name for something on the server side, but this is exactly what it is. This is a server-side SDK, which is mapping the API of your platform into our middleware. And there you actually have like half of the work done. And then on the front end, you have to make use of this data. Some of it is already pre-filled automatically if you put that into the middleware. So you're basically like, displaying a product catalog, etc. This is probably out of the box if you already integrated them.
I think Philip lost connection, but he should be back soon.
Yes, I think he dropped, right?
I think he was saying that there's a documentation for how you integrate Vue Storefront to other CMS or e-commerce systems. So we'll see. We'll try to integrate that. We'll try to link that in the YouTube description. Philip'i beklerken sorularınız varsa lütfen yazın. Hi, Philip.
Yeah, so it will work the same. It will have the same performance. It will probably have the same modules, etc. Like, the more boilerplate we provide, the better. And we tried to do it in a way that we at the same time leave a lot of space for the integrators to change things, but also dictate what is the right way of doing things, like what is the standard, and to make it, as obvious as possible. And by discussions with some integrators, I think we did a pretty solid job, especially that there's a lot of integrations that are made exactly as we would like them to be made, but no one ever asked us, a single question.
Okay, let's hope we see a Turkish version of Vue Storefront, a Turkish user of Vue Storefront, an integration to a Turkish e-commerce system or payment provider.
Yeah, definitely. Really cool. With payments, it's a little bit differently than with e-commerce platforms or CMSs, because every payment has its own way of handling things, right? And when you're integrating payments into Vue Storefront, it does not differ at all than integrating it into any other single-page application. So actually, the payment providers, they are the tough part. I mean, this if something is already hard in integrating payment provider, probably Vue Storefront won't help it. But everything else, it will.
Are you hiring developers, like new developers? Would you hire in Turkey? Do you have any plans?
Well, I don't know what are the rates in Turkey, but we are hiring internationally. We are hiring I think we have like 13 countries right now, including like Luxembourg, Brazil, US, of course. So in general, yes, like if you are from Turkey and if you would like to work in Vue Storefront, just we have a huge recruitment board. I think we're looking for 23 positions right now, so probably you'll find something for yourself.
So let us write it in the description.
Yeah, I think we ask, because some companies, they say we don't hire in Turkey because of legal reasons or contractual reasons and payroll reasons.
Yeah. I mean, there are some companies doing that, and honestly, at the beginning, we also had that problems with some countries, but we quickly find a way to overcome this. I mean, usually there is some company in that area that is allowing you to hire people and handling all this legal stuff for you. So this is what we are using, and if we have more people coming from this specific country, then we are taking things a little bit more personal and seriously, and we're developing our own processes, our own legal procedures, etc. Also, specifying benefits, because we have different benefits for different countries, because actually, like what is a standard in US is not a standard in Poland, and what is a standard in Poland might not be a standard in Germany. So we also have to look at this sort of stuff. But in general, if you are from a company that we have no one from, it's not a problem.
Cool. So I think this would be the message to our viewers. You can apply at Vue Storefront and you will not be rejected straight away because of your location.
Cool. I can promise that.
We'll link to the career page. I think I've seen, as you said, 23 positions, and most of them are engineers.
If I remember right, it could have changed since I last view, but yeah.
Most of them are engineers.
Especially on the go-to-market, if you're a great solution engineer, please write to me.
Is that urgent at the moment? Okay, cool. Solutions architects or integrators? What was
engineers and architects? Well,
okay, cool.
Because I think, especially for the developers. Yeah, continue.
Yeah, go ahead. I was going to switch the topic.
No, I was just saying that it requires a pretty unique skills for a developer, because developers don't like to socialize, and if you're a solution engineer or solution architect, you have to work a lot with people you don't know. So it's always hard to find those people, but if you are one of them, I can guarantee you will love this job.
Cool. Are you able to give us any further insights into your roadmap? I mean, you mentioned there's a lot of stuff coming in the cloud. There's a lot of stuff coming internally in the foundational code.
So I can tell some things, but I would since we are waiting with announcing some of them, because then people will start asking. I will maybe only share the closest things that we are working on. So especially for the integrations, as I said, we are doing a huge rewrite of them, but mostly internally. So what would be there for the customers? At first, it's gonna be a much better performance, because we're gonna get rid of 50-60% of the code that was developed to adapt Nuxt composition API. Secondly, we want to give a little bit more power to our users. So we used to have composables inside our packages for the sake of upgradability. And it made sense, because back then it was super hard to write them, and we needed wrapper functions actually called factories to create them in the project. Right now it's much easier, mostly because of Nuxt, but also because of the way how we are handling our own API. So we decided that we'll probably move composables to the client's project. So they will become part of the boilerplate. You will lose upgradability, but at the same time, the code will be so simple that you really don't need that. And I think there's no point in complicating things, having these extension points and a lot of boilerplates while you can just have access to it. And honestly, I believe like the same should happen with UI libraries, but we don't have plan for this yet. And you can still do this. You can just fork the repo of Storefront UI and put it into your monorepo. We are also building new integrations. So I already mentioned that on our Vue Storefront India meetup. So probably no one from here was there. So actually we are working right now in integration with Elastic Path. We are finishing the integration with SAP Commerce. And I think especially for those platforms, it will be fantastic to have a Vue Storefront frontend because they are both maybe Elastic Path not, but SAP is a huge giant. And abstracting it and being able to use a different frontend than just Spartacus, which is written in Angular. And not everyone are fans of Angular, even though the project is amazing. I was part of the team for 6 months, so I could be a little bit biased. But I think it would be great to have it for SAP. What else? I think the biggest change would be launching our SaaS platform publicly, but I can't disclose what would be there, except the things that I mentioned. I can disclose when would it be, but I can just say that it's definitely worth waiting because we're working on this for a very long time, and we are still extremely excited about this. Honestly, it's very, very hard for me to actually not tell what we are doing. So.
Yeah, and I was thinking about reminding you that this is being recorded publicly so that you're not disclosing too much. Okay, cool. Any questions from the viewers? Because we're going to wrap up in a bit. And Philip, you have to let us know when you're coming to Turkey.
I will really wish to come there. Actually, after COVID, I'm very eager to come anywhere. But Turkey is actually on my bucket list. So sooner or later, I will be there and we will meet again. And I hope you will make me a great tour around local food, just as you did in Berlin.
I will, definitely. And there's actually great conferences in Istanbul and Turkey. So there's this JavaScript conferences and so on. So I'll keep you updated about those as well. So
you can send me those. I would really love to apply for a CFP. This is the best way of traveling, actually.
So you can combine both. And they usually look really well after the guest speakers. Okay, cool. Thank you very much for spending time with us, Philip. I know you're very busy. And looking forward to all the things you mentioned that they're going to be launched soon, so that, I'm biased being a Vue Storefront customer, but we're looking forward to it.
Thanks so much for having me, and it was great talking to you, talking to the Turkish community. And if any of you would like to participate in Vue Storefront community, try it out, have some feedback, or just want to chat, my DMs on Twitter are open. You can also hit me on the Storefront Discord. I'm always willing to discuss. I'm always willing to receive feedback as well. And have a great day.
Yeah, thank you, Philip, for your time.
Take care. Bye.
Bye-bye.